Devils Wednesday. This is the State of the Fan Address, powered by pucksandpitchforks.com. I'm your host, Sam Wu, here with Nick Villano, Pucks and Pitchforks blog editor-in-chief, streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitter Live, and Twitch on the Primetime Radio Network. Oh, do we have a show for you? Start thinking Devils prospects. We got two great guests from Canada, from The Athletic. Scott Wheeler is going to be on shortly. Also, Ryan Kennedy of the Hockey News will also be coming on the podcast live. You know this podcast. And by the way, Nick, before we begin, we are on the eve of hitting 250,000 downloads. 250,000 downloads, the Let's Go Devils podcast. We are stuck right now at, well, I can find out for you. We are, let's go down here. Where are we right now? We are at 249,813 downloads. And because we got a late start of uploading podcasts, we've actually had our first podcast uploaded to iTunes in April 8th of 2018. So since then, we almost ripped out 250,000 downloads. Want to thank all the fans tuning in, listening to all the shenanigans, listening to all the analysis. Great guests, friends of the podcast, like Chico Resch, Steve Cangelosi, Ken Danico, Doc Emmerich, Bryce Salvador. We've had a lot of great guests. Yes. So I want to thank all of you. I just want to get that out there because we're going to celebrate during this 8-day hiatus before Devils fans start killing each other because they don't have any Devils hockey. USA is knocked out. Canada is knocked out in the men's. And is the women's going on right now? Or did that already happen?
It's at 11 tonight. Big game tonight. I'm excited. USA. And we got Utica's on the NHL Network tonight facing the Toronto Marlies. So, there's a couple things to get excited about. It's not all doom and gloom. And then, but I'm so excited to talk to Scott Wheeler tonight. He put out his list of Devils prospects. There was a lot of graduations from his list, like Dawson Mercer, a couple other really good guys. But we were still fourth out of the 32 teams. He really likes our prospect pool. So we're going to ask him a bunch of questions about that. One quick note on last night. And for everybody out there waiting, yes, me and Sam are going to talk about that article that Sam wrote at the end of the podcast. We're going to do our interviews first. Then me and Sam, we're going to get in the ring and put our gloves on. We're going to talk about Mr. Hughes. But we'll do that at the end. You got to wait. That's a tease, Sam. It's a professional tease.
You got to wait because Nick and I are going to duke it out. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be must-see TV is what they would say. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. As seeing people filing in. And this is a special time because we're giving you double trouble. See, when there's an 8-day layoff, we up the ante with content. We didn't get you just one. We got you two, and they're both from Canada, and they know their stuff. That's what I have to say.
That's the key, the Canadian thing?
Yeah.
I noticed. I think
Canadians know everything about hockey.
Did they have the same area code? Is that what tipped you off?
Well, yeah, they're in the same region. Yeah, I mean,
that's funny.
Hey,
you got to do what you got to do when you're in this sport. You got to go where the sport is, as they say. But no, I'm excited to talk to Scott Wheeler. I'm excited to talk to Ryan Kennedy. Ryan Kennedy is some guy we've circled multiple times in the past, and we can never get the schedule right. But Sam, we got the schedule right. We got it going. So excited to talk to him too from the Hockey News. So we got two great guests tonight. But yeah, last night's game. My quick thoughts on it because we only got 3 minutes till we have to go grab Scott. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about the obvious. The goalie's an issue, obviously, but it's much more than that. I'm kind of, I'm understanding why people backlash to analytics so much. I never want to see a deserve to win meter ever again in my life. That meter that says the Devils are supposed to win every freaking game when they lose every freaking game. Like, no, I don't think they didn't deserve to win yesterday. I don't think they played that well. They played well in the first period. Great. That's wonderful. I'm so happy for you that you guys played well in the first period. It makes me very happy. But then you had a stretch of about 4 minutes in the second period where it was some of the worst hockey we've seen them play all year. And the third period, you just didn't. There was just not a lot of fight. Like, it was in the Devil's zone for most of the period. So I don't know where you get that they deserve to win 60% of the time or 62% of the time. So again, that's the one time I'm going to be on your side, Sam. When it comes to analytics, I think we need to use analytics a little more intelligently. Don't just throw everything out there like, oh, see, Devils should have won. No, they shouldn't have won. They were making turnovers. They made major defensive lapses, like major defensive, like that play, like Ty Smith. Ty Smith needs to stop eating broccoli and start eating his Wheaties, because like he needs to stop getting pushed around in front of the net. And that's the thing, is that like it makes sense on paper to pair him with Subban because Subban's a brick house, but that's not Subban's game anymore. Is to knock people around. His game is to use his offensive weapons. So I think I think it would be better if you put Smith with Colton White, but Colton White's playing so well where he is now. Do you really want to mess that up? There's a lot of decisions the Devils have to make, and a lot of them are hard decisions. A lot of them are going to upset the apple. The was it upset the apple core? Is that what they say? But the good news is you expect to have Dougie Hamilton back by the time you come back from this hiatus. So that's the good news. I don't think they're going to win a lot of games down the stretch, and that's okay. At least it's going to be somewhat fun, and at least we're going to see the players grow. I don't know. I'm trying to pull something out of the Sam. That game yesterday was just bad to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised that they had the lead. I was feeling good about it in the beginning, to be honest, and then things fell apart. The Tampa Bay Lightning are Stanley Cup champions back-to-back for a reason. They react. They hold themselves accountable. And they turn it around in the second half of the game. And the Devils had no reaction other than letting goals in. So we'll talk about a little bit more about that. I'll get Scott Wheeler of The Athletic on shortly. Nick, social media is buzzing, so talk to them, Nick.
Yeah, and I see Corbin with something I've seen a lot. Ty overachieved last year. He is Butcher 2.0. Everybody's calling him Will Butcher 2.0. And I get why you're going to make that correlation, because Will Butcher had that phenomenal rookie season, and he fell off slightly in year 2, and he fell off precipitously in year 3, and now he's barely an NHL player. I don't know why. I don't have the stats to back this up, but I'm telling you that he is going to bounce back next year. I think he's a mess this year. He is. He's a mess this year. I don't think the Lindy Ruff system fits him as well as it did last year. I think he's now trying to do too much. When last year, he was with Severson, he could kind of just play his game. It's the same old with the Devils defense, where they ask these players to do too much, and then it causes them to fail. They asked Damon Severson to do too much for the past 3 years, and now he looks worse because of it. I think that it helped, because I think they're going to trade Severson this trade deadline. I've always said that I don't think they're going to trade him. He was too valuable prior to this. But this is the sweet spot. This is the spot where you get him for 2 postseasons, and teams pay big. We saw that proposal on The Athletic today from the Leafs, where the Leafs would trade Timothy Liljegren, a first-round pick, and then another prospect or young player like that. yo, if that's what's getting, is that what Damon Severson's getting? I think Liljegren is somebody who's going to do very well in the NHL. I know it's taken him a little longer than some people expected from him to grow, but I think he's going to do very well in the NHL, and I would do a lot to get him on the team. So I think that I think it's going to be good. Sam, you're back.
I'm back with our next guest. His name is Scott Wheeler. He's a prospect writer for The Athletic. You can find him on Twitter at Scott C. Wheeler. Scott, you're on with Sam and Nick. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well. I've just moved about a week ago, so I'm sitting in my basement surrounded by boxes here.
I'm sure it's a nice ambiance.
Yeah, it is coming together. I can see the vision in my head of what it's going to look like. We just got to get there. It's not unlike a prospect here.
You know what? That's what we call a professional transition on this podcast, Scott. That is a professional transition. Yeah, you wrote the quintessential prospects piece that you do every year, ranking each team and then ranking that team's prospects. I'm sure it takes quite a long time to put all these lists together because me just doing the ones for the Devils takes quite a long time. So I don't envy you there, but the piece came out amazing. I love the in-depth analysis you put in a lot of the players, and I learned a lot even from when I was researching the prospects. But we got to talk right off the top. The Devils have two A-plus prospects in their system. It's Alexander Holtz and it's Luke Hughes. Every prospect writer seems to flip-flop them about where you rank them. You ranked Holtz first. Why did you rank Holtz ahead of Hughes?
Well, it came really right down to the wire. I mentioned in the piece that it was one of the tougher decisions that I had to make with any of the 32 teams. It was just so tight. They were actually back-to-back, believe it or not, in my top 50 drafted prospects ranking last summer, which is players league-wide, and the two Devils kids still managed to be back-to-back. So that just speaks to how close I think they are in terms of their level, their ceiling, their potential impact, all of that. And that remains true today. I think you could make an easy argument for Luke Hughes. He's been even better in the last few games since this was published. So maybe today I'm even thinking about it differently just because of how good he's been in the last couple of weeks without Owen Power. And with Owen off at the Olympics, Luke has really taken charge of that team, dictated play, sort of commanded the back end, and been the star that he is in college hockey already as one of the youngest players in college hockey. So it's two tremendous prospects. I wouldn't read too much into this slotting one way or another, no matter who's making the argument. And I think they're both fabulous. I think Holtz is going to be a top six winger in the NHL who's going to play on a first power play unit and be a true impact guy who can score goals. And I think Luke is going to be, if not a number one defenseman, then certainly a number two defenseman who is tremendous in transition. That's always going to be his bread and butter, and has really learned this year to attack and to be more aggressive inside the offensive zone. Instead of just rotating around the outside of the offensive zone to make his plays with his skating, he's getting to the interior. He's looking for his own shot. All of those things have begun to really flourish in his game, and he's found a new level as a result. So, two players that everybody should be very, very excited about.
Do you think Luke... I think that Holtz is going to make the NHL next year. Do you think Luke Hughes can make the NHL next year?
I wouldn't expect that. It's almost never happens that we see a freshman defender turn pro out of his freshman season. I think he'll follow the same blueprint that Cale Makar and Jake Sanderson and Zach Werenski and his brother Quinn all followed, which was to play 2 seasons in college hockey and then turn pro after your sophomore year and make an impact that way. Especially because of how young he is and because he was a late birthday in his draft class and one of the younger players in his draft class, there's no rush. There's no reason that he can't go back to college next year and really take over that team in the absence of Owen Power, who is going to turn pro at the end of this season. So a new opportunity for him next year, greater minutes for him next year, and he really gets to be the guy on that team after they lose likely both Owen Power, Matt Beniers, and Kent Johnson to the NHL. So I'd actually, quite frankly, like to see him go back and play one more year in college. I think it would do him well. And really, again, there is no need to rush this kid given his age.
So you were talking about in your piece having a lot of graduations on this team. Obviously, Jack Hughes, he's probably only been on one of your lists, if any, and he's still not old enough to drink yet. But besides him, there's Dawson Mercer, and there's a couple other players that graduated from your list, but you still had the Devils fourth in the entire NHL. We know it's a pretty close race in that top 10. Like, there's a lot of teams that you could kind of change the order of. So what made you put the Devils in the top 5?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It was really a top 4 to 9 for me. There was a clear top 3 in this year's ranking, and then there was a clear top 9. So whether you slot them 4th or 5th, or whether you slot them 8th or 9th, I think there's a strong case for them in either one of those ranges. But regardless of the outcome, I think they're clearly a top 10 pool in the league. And that is, as you mentioned, without Ty Smith, without Dawson Mercer, without Sharon Govich. They've turned some talent around here and still managed to keep the pool strong. Obviously, Luke Hughes and Alexander Holtz have a lot to do with that. But even beyond them, there's some sneaky depth. They don't have the depth and quality after those two that, say, the Los Angeles Kings have after their top couple of prospects, or the Buffalo Sabres have after their top couple, or even the Minnesota Wild, who were my third-ranked team, have after their top couple. But there's still some good pieces there. Obviously, Arseny Gritziak has really established himself as a legitimate prospect, has seemed to, with every half season almost, upgrade his projection and go from fringe prospect to a potential top 9 forward in the NHL. So Arseny has helped them. I think Graham Clark has been great this year. I liked what they did at last year's draft, finding little pieces like Samu Salmonen, who's a kid that I'm quite fond of. And then they've got defensemen of kind of all shapes and sizes. Obviously, Kevin Ball and Nikita Okatiek really look nothing like, say, a Luke Hughes does. So there's variety in the pool as well. They've got kids who play sort of aggressive offensive games. They've got the sort of stay-at-home, lockdown defensive type. And then they've got some fringe kids who are really starting to pique my interest as well, with players like Ethan Edwards, who has been another player who has really stepped up in Owen Power's absence and taken on greater minutes at Michigan in the last month and played quite well. So it's an interesting group from top to bottom. Still clearly outside of that top 3 that I had in my rankings, but certainly in that sort of upper echelon of the league nonetheless.
So one that really stood out to me was your ranking of Tyce Thompson. He's somebody I had lower on my personal list because he's been injured. We haven't seen a ton of him this year. Since he signed out of college, he's kind of been varied results. But you had him as the 4th-ranked prospect in your list. What made Tyce Thompson somebody who you really like?
Yeah, Tyce is a kid who has really, really intrigued me over the last couple of years in particular. Obviously, the injury is a tough blow. It's a setback. It's not what he, I'm sure, envisioned for his first full pro season after sort of leaving college last year. And it's just been a little bit of a bumpier road for him in terms of getting his pro career started. But in saying that, Tyce has been, the last few years, but previous to the injury, has been a legit prospect. He really established himself at Providence as one of the better forwards in college hockey. I spoke with the staff there over recent years at length, whether it's Nate Lehman, their head coach, or Joel Beal, their assistant coach. I've picked their brains about Tyce and what he offers, and they just speak so highly of him. They say that he actually considered turning pro a year earlier after his sophomore year rather than his junior year, but decided to ultimately come back so that he could be that team's captain. And I just see a very complete player. He's a little bit of a skinny kid, but he's got a pro-sized frame. He's very talented. He can make plays. He can score goals. He can sort of play on the perimeter, or he can play in the dirty areas and get to the front of the net. Despite being kind of that skinnier kid, he doesn't shy away physically, and he involves himself, and he wants to be engaged out there. So he's a kid that I'm very fond of, and I suspect that once he gets into a rhythm and gets some pro games under his belt, that you're quickly going to see him progress over the next year or two from sort of fringe call-up option AHL, NHL kind of guy to a full-time NHL piece of the puzzle.
I love all that I'm hearing there. That's something I definitely like to hear, because that's just another piece. You know, he was a former fourth rounder, and you love to see those turn into that. You know, definitely. Before we let you go, you know, there's a lot of prospects to talk about. There's just a lot of players that you can talk yourself into in this Devils prospect pool. So I kind of want you to look at your list from like 10 and 20, or even if it's like an honorable mention, or even a guy you didn't even list. Who's somebody that you were researching, you were looking into, and you thought, despite where you were ranking him, can make that jump, similar to like a Gritzik did, where he's in like that middle of the range, fringe NHLer range, but can make a jump in the next year or two to where he's somebody you're locked down NHL guy.
Yeah, I think I kind of touched on him off the top here, but I think the kid who's got the most potential to change his outlook and change the way he's perceived and go from sort of a C-level prospect to a B-level prospect, if you will, is Edwards. He's been in an interesting situation at Michigan this year as a freshman, where he came in and he's talented enough to play every day, and they recognize that. But they've got a deep blue line, and he is one of two players who has kind of rotated in and out of the 6th and 7th D spot so that they can get everybody some looks. He actually didn't play when I was in Ann Arbor at the end of November to watch that team play, and it wasn't because he was playing poorly. It was just because they've got too many guys, and everybody needs to get some looks. So he's a kid who I know they love. I know Mel Pearson and that staff there, Phil Muckall, they're all very big fans of Ethan Edwards. And he can absolutely skate like an NHLer already, which is half the battle with defensemen these days. So the fact that his edges and his ability to manipulate coverage and defend the rush with his feet and close gaps, that's already a major strength. And I suspect that Edwards is a player who will really benefit from a greater opportunity next year. And really, as he goes from freshman to sophomore, and then sophomore to junior, and then junior to senior, you're going to see emerge as a dominant sort of top of the lineup NCAA defenseman who might earn himself an entry-level contract when he's done. So Edwards is a kid that's a lot of fun to watch, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing what he becomes once he gets a sort of greater role on that team over the next couple of years.
And Scott, real quick before we let you go, is Michigan the favorite to like win it all? Are they the favorite to win the Frozen Four, or should we be paying more attention to Michigan here with two Devils there?
Yeah, they're certainly in the conversation. I think they're one of the best teams in the country this year. I think they certainly have, once they get everybody back and rolling, I think it will take them some time down the stretch here to get all of these kids that they've lost, the Brissons, the Johnsons, Power. Once they get those guys back in the fold, as great as they are, it's going to take some shifting and maneuvering around to sort of rejig everything again. But if they get into the rhythm that they've been in for most of this year, I think they have all of the pieces to potentially win a national championship here this year. And I know they're all dedicated to that. They obviously had COVID play a role in the cancellation of their Frozen Four pursuit last year. And they're a much stronger team this year. Their core pieces are all a year older. They almost didn't lose anybody other than Strauss-Mann, their starting goaltender. And Strauss has been replaced almost effortlessly by Eric Portillo, the Sabres prospect, in net. I think Portillo can steal a game for them when it matters. So, they're the real deal. They're one of the 3 or 4 best teams in college hockey for me this year.
Oh, we love to hear that. Scott, let our listeners know where they can find your stuff. Where can they find the rest of the prospect list? Maybe if you're working on anything else, where can they find all your stuff?
Yeah, it's all at The Athletic these days. I know subscriptions can be a tough sell for some people who aren't necessarily sure whether they want to spend $3 or $4 a month to read our work, but I would encourage you to give us a shot, any listener to give The Athletic a shot, and I think you won't be disappointed by our coverage top to bottom. Certainly, I think we offer the best hockey coverage in the world in terms of the media landscape these days. And with the price of one subscription, you obviously also get access to all of our coverage of the other major North American sports, Premier League soccer, the PGA Tour, all of that. So I know that's a little bit of a marketing pitch here, but I give us a shot. I don't think you'll be disappointed.
And here's the thing, Scott, just to kind of go off that, I know a lot of Devils fans were a little upset with the Athletic because Corey left and he went to the Sharks. And then obviously Shayna, she's very talented, but she's doing a lot of things. But there's so many national writers like you and Dom and Down Goes Brown and Sean is his real name, but and the other Sean, just like talking about all the different things, that there is a lot of Devils coverage. There's a lot of people talking Devils, and Corey obviously too, Corey Prongman. Basically every other day you're going to get something on the Devils in some capacity, whether it's from Shayna or from you, Scott, or from everybody. I'm not gonna lie. I thought about it. I was like, oh well, Corey's leaving. Like, should I stick around with this? And I still find myself going to the Athletic a lot, and I'm very happy with the money that I'm spending on my Athletic subscription. And we appreciate guys like Scott coming on the Let's Go Devils podcast and giving us a little bit of that extra insight, a little bit of that pointed insight of his decisions on the Devils. So, Scott, I really appreciate you coming on, and we're definitely going to have you on again.
Yep, and I appreciate you saying all that. I think Shayna is tremendous at what she does, and all of our national writers at The Athletic are doing everything we can to make sure we give and provide consistent Devils coverage. And I've got a few Devils stories I'm working on myself at the moment on some of the kids. So plenty on the daily in terms of Devils coverage, and I appreciated you sort of adding that note at the end. And ultimately, Corey made his decision to go to the Sharks because that was what was best for him as well. And I'm just really happy that he's in a place that he wants to be as well. So shout out to Corey, who's a tremendous writer and did unbelievable Devils coverage for us.
Yeah, Corey did an awesome job. We love Corey. I still follow his stuff at San Jose. And sometimes I click on an article, even though I have nothing to get out of the Sharks. But, it is nice to see, him get into a place. How could you hate Southern California right now? So, you got to love that. But thanks again, Scott. We'll talk to you soon.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Scott. That is Scott Wheeler, prospect writer for The Athletic. At Scott C. Wheeler is his Twitter handle. If you haven't subscribed to The Athletic, do it. My news, it's funny because my renewal date for The Athletic is January 15th or something like that.
Yeah.
And the reason why it's January 15th is I had a New Year's resolution that I'm not going to have any McDonald's, Taco Bell, all the junk food. So I'm going to take those dollars and spend it on The Athletic. That's why my renewal date is in the middle of January. And it so happens that my renewal date for Devil season tickets is around the same time. So that's how I plan things. But
maybe just go back to McDonald's, Sam, instead of.
I rather see Jack Hughes develop than eating a Big Mac.
That's fair. Listen, and here's the thing. I don't want to. We talked
We're not supposed to talk about
about
it now.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about how good The Athletic has treated us over the years, and they have. Most of the writers that I've asked to come on have come on. And some are even, Scott's never been skeptical. He's always been gung-ho to come on and talk with us. But there's been a couple been like, well, what would we talk about? And then, I kind of give them the pitch. And they always are like, okay. They're always willing to give it a shot. Most of them, at least. Some I've tried and I failed. But it is what it is. There's very few and far between. Most of the Athletic writers have been very generous with their time. And they come on and we say oh, you don't have a Devils writer, or Shayna's doing Ranger stuff and she's doing Islander stuff and she's doing Maple Leaf stuff. I get it. First of all, the girl's hustling. She's working for Sportsnet now too. She's she's got 3 or 4 different jobs, and she's still providing Devils coverage. So it's because she doesn't tweet like Corey tweeted. Okay, she's not in the press conference. That's fine. If you guys want them to say something in the press conference, tweet at Dan Rice, because he's at the press conferences. You guys complain about the press conferences, but then we got a guy at Pucks and Pitchforks at the press conferences. Let him know if you want him to ask him a question. Maybe he'll even write a piece on it. Who knows? But, anyway, I don't want to go on a rant about that. I love everything that I read at The Athletic. I'm excited when we get to talk to the people from The Athletic because they bring that insight was wonderful. I literally I just wrote my top 25 prospects, and I don't have the insight that Scott has because he's doing the research every day, all day. He spends a lot of time watching the games, and he's got that focus down. So all love to Scott. We really appreciate him coming on, and I'm excited about Gritziak and Ethan Edwards and Luke Hughes and Alexander Holtz. Like, that was a funny thing is he ranked Holtz a little bit higher than Hughes, but he spoke a lot about Hughes because Hughes, the sky's the limit for Luke Hughes. It really is because he's somebody who could, like, we looked at it like, oh, great, we'll have the Hughes brothers and Jack will be the star, right? That's kind of how we looked at it, right, Sam?
Mm-hmm.
So we look at it that way, but Luke might also be a superstar. Like, he looks like $1 million in college. He looks like he can. That's why I asked him if I thought he could come right into the NHL. I thought that was preposterous to even consider, right? Then I saw him this week. This is the week I thought, well, maybe this is a conversation now because he dominated on the ice when Owen Power was in China. So he's sitting here. He's dominating as the number one. And that's what you want to see from a guy who you think could one day make the NHL and do really well in the NHL when he's in college. You want him to be the number one guy, and you want him to just be the best player on the ice. And that's what from what I saw in the highlights I saw, Luke Hughes is a force on the ice.
Yeah, and you know what? The future is bright. I use this term over and over and over again. 2025. That's when we get to see the fruits of what Tom Fitzgerald has done since he got the job. And Luke Hughes, you've got time. Right now, Dawson Mercer, he had a decent game last night. And, he's finding his navigating through an 82 game. Yeah, well.
A goal.
Well, he's navigating through an NHL 82-game NHL schedule in his rookie season. Alexander Holtz, I think Utica's down right now, but has been ripping up Utica. I think Kevin Ball has started to come pretty hot lately with Utica. So, again, it does take time. This is really take two of the rebuild. Because the first take, there was a lot of things that needed to be changed, going from Lou Lamoriello of 28 years and changing around the entire organization up and down. It was only recently, Nick, because I've been the biggest complainer of being patient, that I realized recently that, and it was on pucksandpitchforks.com that I wrote that, it's going to take some time before we actually see what Tom Fitzgerald has done through the draft and through that pipeline. Right now, they haven't played yet. So you can't expect the Devils to be the number one team in the league or number one in the Metropolitan Division. Jack Hughes is, putting up numbers now. A healthy Jack Hughes right now. And also Nico Hischier as well, being under the age of 25 and being a young captain of the franchise, he's going to go through some growing pains. But when they start to, mature and they start to, become true veterans, and they are going to enter into their prime, I think we're going to see an organization that has suffered so much, but they're going to have a tremendous talent pool within the pipeline by 2024-25 season, where they've got options. And hopefully they manage their cap space well and don't give out big contracts to players that would eventually become dead cap space, so to speak. But I will say this, though, Nick, that I really think that, and you're going to kill me here, but I've changed my mind, and I think that Lindy Ruff should stay till at least the end of next year. Because I just think that you need to have that continuity. He's a coach that, did very well with Buffalo. He did pretty well with Dallas. And I know I'm going to get killed for it. But you know what? I'd like to see him get another shot even next year. Let me ask
you this. We only have 2 minutes to talk about this. And I feel like that's not enough time. But what have you seen that makes you think he should keep his job? Beyond just because your argument so far is we shouldn't fire him because we fired too many people.
Well, here's look at the special teams. The numbers are looking a lot better. They were awful in October, November, but somehow they were 8-5-3. That penalty kill was ranked the worst last season, historically the worst. Their power play was historically the worst. The net on their power play was historically going back. Was it this podcast? We were going back to 1978.
67.
67. That it was historically the worst, and of now,
maybe we went to 78 on the podcast, but I definitely went to 67 for maybe an article. It was either the worst. At one point, it was by far the worst in the history, and the history goes back. The history of penalty kill numbers goes back to 67. But they I think they got a little bit above the very worst, and I think they're like third worst ever or something like that.
Yeah, and let me finish because this is important. When you're talking about young team and you're talking about mentorship and showing them a road, because this is a very, very young team, and I want to make that point out. And I'm starting to realize it because even I was wrong about not being patient. But when you have a young team, it's all about nurturing. I don't think we need a Tortorella just yet. I don't think we need one that's going to throw garbage cans and all that. There's still some nurturing that needs to be done with this. I'm not talking about coddling, but Lindy Ruff and Mark Recchi and Nasruddin has taken a lot of big hits. But when you see that special teams, I'm interested to see what the next 31, 32 games is going to bring. Because if they start to rank in the top 10 in the league overall, if they keep on improving, because right now I think the penalty kill is right now ranked number 8 when it was dead last at 32.
Yeah.
For a big stretch of last season and beginning of this season, to me that's progress, and that's the only. I know the record is terrible, but I'm gonna go out on a limb, and if you want to hate me for it, that's fine. I don't care, but I'm kind of changed my mind on it. And I'm
dropped a bomb before we have to go get our second guest. So I feel like this is unfair. I feel like this is unfair. But go get our guest so I can talk to myself about your craziness. Go get our guest. Listen, I don't hate Lindy Ruff. I hated the hire at first. I talked myself into it. I liked some of the things that he did last year. But he's a mess this year. I'm sorry. The special teams are much better. I will give Sam that. But they don't make adjustments on the fly. The in-game adjustments are usually worse. And he's not getting... His system is grading on certain players. And it's great for Dougie Hamilton. It's good for Jack Hughes. Although I think Jack Hughes would do good in any system. It's really good for Jesper Bratt. I don't know if it's good for Nico. I don't know if it's good for players like Tatar. Doesn't seem to be good for Holtz. Doesn't seem to be good for Ty Smith. Hasn't really worked. I mean, it's been good for Subban. As much as people like to hate on Subban, I think Subban's having a good season. based on expectations. He's not having a $9 million season, but he's having a much better season last year and a world's better season than his first year in New Jersey. So I think that has to do with the Lindy Ruff system, but it's not something that's going to fit everybody, and that's a little bit of an issue. But Sam's back.
I'm back. I just had that big revelation before. I see social media is going crazy, wanting Lindy Ruff back for another season.
Listen, man, I'm just here so I don't get fined, I guess. I don't know.
You know what? It's okay. Like I said, it's
you
all
just
in
want to
the
get yelled
development.
At tonight. That was your thing. You wrote it. You wrote a hot take article, and then you're saying hot takes in the podcast. We got our guests waiting.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry about that. Well, our next guest, he's from the Hockey News. His name is Ryan Kennedy. You can find him on Twitter at THN Ryan Kennedy. Ryan, you're on with Sam and Nick. How are you tonight?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Ryan, it's good to have you on. We have so much to talk about when it comes to the Devils, which is surprising because we're off for 8 days and we're terrible. But there's just a lot going on with this team.
Yeah, and I mean, this is an interesting year for them. Obviously, with all the injuries and everything they've gone through, I'm sure it's not what they pictured as part of the rebuild. But unfortunately, you're going to have the ups and downs, and I mean, especially in the NHL this year, things have just been so unpredictable when it comes to missing players that I think you just kind of, call it a write-off and take the positives out of it.
Okay, that's fair. There hasn't been a ton of positives for the Devils this year. One positive we have had is Jack Hughes, the superstar, our all-star. He's been everything we've wanted and more. So basically, I want to know, how high can he take this? Can he be one of the best players in the league, or are we, do we maybe have to temper expectations a little bit? Where do you see the ceiling for Jack Hughes?
Well, realistically, I think that he's going to be a star, but not a superstar necessarily. When I think about superstars, I think Connor McDavid, Alex Ovechkin, Austin Matthews, the guys that are way, way up there that, can get you 50 goals or they can get you 120 points, that sort of thing. I think Jack Hughes is going to be a very good player and, has the chance to be a true number one center in the NHL. I do think that's his ceiling. But, I think he's the kind of guy that if you could get like an 85 or 90 point season out of him, and he is a point per game player already at age 20 right now, 30 and 30, then I think you'd be super happy if you're a New Jersey fan to get a player that, legit would be, let's call him a top 15, maybe even top 10 center in the NHL. But I think somewhere between 10 and 15 would be, the ceiling.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Yeah. And are you pleasantly surprised with what he's done this year, or do you think this was always kind of, he just needed time to progress?
Well, I think that was kind of the story all along. And I know there was, there have been pundits, there have been fans that early on in his career were kind of worried. He's had some pretty bad goal droughts, but, you have to keep in mind how little NHL hockey he has actually played right now because of shortened seasons, and because of the fact that he is so young. I mean, this is the first player ever to go straight from the national team development program to the NHL. I mean, Patrick Kane didn't do that. Austin Matthews didn't do that. Jack Hughes was the first to do it. So for a guy that, is basically my size to go to the NHL as an 18-year-old and go through such adversity, I think where we see him right now, it's still just the beginning. I mean, he hasn't even played 150 NHL games yet. So we're talking about basically a season and a half of duty, a little bit more than that total. I still think there's so much to unearth. So the fact that we're seeing a point per game player right now, I think bodes well for the future. And obviously he has to keep building on that, and the Devils have to keep building around him. But yeah, I would say that maybe not pleasantly surprised, but when I look at him, I say, okay, we can see the track now, and it's going in a positive direction.
So I kind of want to pivot a little bit. You've been writing at the Hockey News about trade targets, and we're getting around a month to the trade deadline, and so it makes sense. I didn't see if you've gotten to the Devils yet, but looking at the Devils roster and kind of who might be available, who do you think are the main trade targets? And then maybe who do you think is somebody that might be surprisingly on other teams' radar?
Well, I think the most obvious one is PK Subban because he is on the final year of his deal. And, the Devils do have cap space, so they could eat some of that $9 million cap hit in order to facilitate a trade. And, if you're a contending team and you can get Subban at, say, half his hit or even take a couple of $1 million off, and obviously keep in mind that salary cap is prorated, so by the time you get a guy at the deadline, it's not actually technically $9 million that you have to deal with. You look at him and you say, hey, he's not the player he once was, but this is a guy with a ton of experience. Typically, he has done very well in the playoffs, got that big shot. If he's not the guy on the team, then maybe he still has some value for a contender. If PK Subban is your number 4 defenseman on a contending team, you're probably feeling pretty good about yourself. So I think he's the obvious one. I would say, if Thomas Tatar was producing a little better, then maybe you could convince a team that it would be worth taking him for 2 years because he does have 1 more year on his contract. I'm not so sure about that right now, especially at 4.5. And then the one that has been rumored, at least up here in Canada, which is sort of an intriguing one, is Pavel Zacha. Apparently Vancouver has interest in him. And, I think it's fair to say that his career in New Jersey hasn't lived up to his draft position, and these things happen. But he is still only 24. He is still only a restricted free agent. So you do have control there. And, he's got some size. He's got some versatility. Cap hit's only 2.2. I think that is sort of an under-the-radar one that we should at least be aware of.
What do you think his value is?
I mean, I can't say it's super high right now, but I think you could probably get maybe a couple of decent picks for it. Maybe you can get a second and a third. Like I say, if you're trading for him, you are getting some RFA years, so you do have some control. And maybe you think it's just a change of scenery that he needs. Maybe maybe another team sees another path for him. Maybe a second and a third's a bit high. Maybe it's a third and a fourth. But I think you get a couple of decent picks for him.
That's interesting. I do think you're right with the change of scenery factor. I think that he could still be a really good player. I don't know. I don't think he's ever going to be a 6th overall player, especially in that draft. Mm-hmm. But I think he could be a good player in the right system, and I just don't think that's this. I don't think that's what he's doing now is what is the best suited for Pavel Zacha. So I guess I sent you this question on Monday. I guess this all changes now because of what happened last night. But I guess the question is still the same. What's the point of this season for the Devils? What is the point? They lose 6-3 to the Lightning after going up 3-1. It was kind of like a listless effort in the third period. what's going to motivate them? What are we looking forward to as fans from this team?
Well, I think this is a year where you wanted to get Jack Hughes on track, and you did accomplish that. You wanted to see Nico Hischier healthy, doing well, and I think we're getting there. I think obviously he could produce a little bit more, but I think if you're a member of this team, you got to say to yourself, we've got some really good young kids coming up. So if I want to keep my job, I got to up my game. And I think we've seen some great progress from guys like Jesper Bratt. And obviously Dawson Mercer has been, I guess I would say, a pleasant surprise. I've always been a big Dawson Mercer fan, but I don't know if I could claim that I knew he was going to be an impact player at 19. So that's great for them. And then you also have Alex Holt coming up. He's tearing up the AHL this season. He's gotten a taste, whatnot. How soon does Luke Hughes come to town? Is it as soon as next season? That's a good question. And then you look at this lineup and you say, okay, we've used 6 goaltenders, not ideal. We haven't had Dougie Hamilton for the full campaign. We haven't had Miles Wood, and that's a guy that, makes everybody feel bigger on the ice when he's out there. So we don't quite know what we have here, but there's some good signs. So I think the point from here on out is for a lot of these guys to kind of stake out where they belong on this team and really kind of make their case going into the summer, because more competition is coming, and we know there's going to be at least some turnover. Let's just assume PK Subban's not going to re-sign. I think that's kind of an obvious one. But there's going to be some spots available. So I think the assessment for GM Tom Fitzgerald and his staff, it has already begun for next year.
And before I let you go, Ryan, and I really appreciate you coming on, talking to us, giving us a little bit of what to look out for on the NHL side, because it's been a lot this season, Ryan. I got to tell you, it's been a lot. But right now the goaltending position is, we're on options number 4 and 6 right now is basically where we're at. Nico Dawes and John Gillies. Jonathan Bernier is done for the season. Mackenzie Blackwood is done for the foreseeable future. We haven't really gotten an update on his status. What do you do with this situation? So you got Jonathan Bernier with the hip injury. We've done this with Corey Schneider, and it went terribly. Do you hope and pray that it goes better next season with the same 2 guys? Do you look to make a move now to try to get a goalie to survive for the rest of the season? Or do you maybe make a long-term move, maybe make a big boy move, and get a goalie who can sustain? What would you do if you're in the Devil's shoes, Ryan?
I would roll with it, and sort of cynically say, like, can't get any worse. The Devils aren't making the playoffs, so you don't have to worry about that. The plan all along was to have a veteran that could be there with Mackenzie Blackwood and sort of shepherd him along the way. And, the initial try was Corey Schneider. That didn't work out. They bring in Bernier. Worked better, but obviously now he's hurt. He's still got another year on his contract. So, yeah, you hope the hip situation figures itself out in the summer and you can at least get something from Bernier next year. What you can also do is now at least you've gotten Nico Dawes and Akira Schmid some NHL action. So, if you needed a bit of a stopgap, like let's say Jonathan Bernier is not ready till October next season, as long as Blackwood's good to go, you can probably ride him and, sub in Dawes and Schmid every once in a while, maybe when you're playing like Montreal or Columbus or somebody. But yeah, I think, the plan now is Blackwood. You've got a lot of security there. They've put a lot of faith in him so far. And you're in a situation where you don't want to make a bad mistake right now. You don't want to sign a goaltender to like a $7 million deal when you're in such good cap space right now. So, I think you just kind of like stay the course. You work on everything else on the team, and, next year is kind of the litmus test. Because honestly, and I've said this for years, goaltending is it's usually the easiest thing to find when you need it. I would argue right now the Devils don't need it because they're not actually contending. But when you do need a goalie, there always seems to be one via free agency. There always seems to be one via trade. If Marc-Andre Fleury can get moved, then anybody can get moved, in terms of like having a big contract and being a big name. So for me, it's not too much of a concern right now. Although, you do hope that Bernier is healthy next season because he is an important part of that plan.
Ryan Kennedy, let our listeners know where they can find your stuff, what you got coming up, what you got coming up for the hockey news.
Well, you can find all my stuff at thehockeynews.com. As you said before, I'm on Twitter at THN Ryan Kennedy. And we got the rookie issue on sale now. And then we're working on our trade deadline issue. That closes next week. And then coming up on the horizon, something that I'm sure will be fun for Devils fans, Future Watch. We're just starting to put together the lineup for Future Watch, and that's always one of our best-selling issues. So cop that when it comes out.
Love it. Yeah, the hockey news, it's an institution, and it's one we love getting the insights from. Ryan Kennedy, thanks so much for coming on. We'll definitely have you on again.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
That is Ryan Kennedy of the Hockey News. You can find him on Twitter at THN Ryan Kennedy. Well, Nick, I listen to great hockey discussions all podcasts long. And I'm soaking up the knowledge. I'm soaking up because when you talk about prospects. Oh, crap.
We can talk. Listen, Ryan. Before we move on, I will say Ryan had a lot of interesting things to say. He was muted on the ceiling for Jack, or not muted. Maybe that's not the word. His ceiling for Jack Hughes was a lot lower than I thought it would be. I'll just be honest. I didn't think top 15 center is not what a lot of Devils fans like to hear, and the ceiling for the player you're building your entire situation around. So he might not be wrong, but it's not something we like to hear, especially when we've seen what we've seen this year. So that was interesting. But I'm definitely interested on that trade deadline piece that they're going to write for the trade deadline issue next week's trade deadline issue. Excited to see that. Future Watch is definitely something that we're going to have to look into. We love to talk about the prospects here because, well, we don't win on the ice, so we need to win on other ices. So it's a lot, but that's that.
So you're going to yell at me?
I'm going to question you. Let's say that. Here's the thing. First of all, if you haven't read Sam's article on HockeyBuzz.com titled Lightning Struck 5 Times, Jack Hughes is Mr. Turnover. And I'm assuming you mean 5 times after we went up 3-1? Is that
5 unanswered goals?
Yeah. Okay. I was confused at first. I thought you got the score wrong, and I was like, Sam, I can't help this. This I can't help. But then I realized when I was reading the article that you were talking about everything that happened after 3-1. And then you talk about Jack Hughes as Mr. Turnover. Now, I understand where you're going with this because I myself, and I've talked about this before, I am not a fan of the no-look pass. Jack Hughes is a very big fan of the no-look pass, And it goes wrong too often. But first of all, why don't you give me your thought process about writing this piece?
My thought process is that Jack Hughes offensively is carrying the team most times, but it's kind of like I'll use maybe a little business analogy. You can make a lot of money, but if you're spending more, you're in debt. And there are times where I think a lot of some of the plays that Jack Hughes gets involved in, I can appreciate his effort in terms of trying to make something out of nothing, trying to get his team scoring, the pedal to the metal. But, when you go back to the Devils' successful years, and let's not talk about, the trap or anything like that, you've got to mitigate and protect the puck as much as possible because, there were times this season there was no reason for Jack Hughes to take risky plays. When you're up 1-0 or 2-0, you do a blind drop pass and the defenseman is not there to take it, and suddenly it's an odd man rush going the other way, and you've got a goaltender back there that's, left to dry, just, 2-on-none, trying to catch up. Those are unnecessary. I want Jack Hughes to be an elite player. In terms of takeaways, he's very, very good. But the giveaways, he just needs to clean up his game a little bit. I want him to be a top 5 centerman in the league. And, when Ryan came on, I want to listen to the podcast again because I'm still soaking it in. So I'm going to reserve comment. But I think Jack Hughes, if he changes, again, this is all correctable. This is not stuff that, there's a lot of things about Jack Hughes you just can't teach to another hockey player. He's got a vision like no one else. You can compare him to a lot of great hockey players, but I want him to be a complete hockey player on the defensive side, and also protecting the puck and not being such a liability. But granted, he's still young. I mean, he's still young, and he's got a lot of upside to grow in. That's all I was just trying to say. I wasn't trying to troll the internet with that, but it's holding Jack Hughes accountable. And if Jack Hughes were to come onto this podcast, I'm pretty sure he would admit that there are some things he can improve on.
Yeah. I mean, he's 20. He's still slightly undersized. He's getting better in that aspect, and that has a lot to do with the losing the puck. So I was curious. So I looked at who's leading the league at giveaways, and this is at even strength. It's a lot of defensemen at the top, so I'll skip them. But when it comes to forwards, the players that are leading the league in giveaways, number 1 is Leon Draisaitl. Number 2 is Andrei Svechnikov. Number 3 is Brian Getzlaf, he's kind of like an outlier here. Number 4 is Matthew
Tkachuk. Yep.
I don't know. That's not a word I've never.
Tongue twister. It happens.
And then tied for number 5 is John Tavares and David Pastrnak. The theme here is that they're all players whose primary role is to hold on to the puck. Primary role. Jack Hughes is not on that list because of the injury. He would be right up there with those players because he's averaging about a giveaway a game. Just under, but basically a giveaway a game. And I agree with you when it comes to the less advisable passes. Because one of the things we talked about when the Devils drafted Jack Hughes was his hockey IQ was one of the highest we've seen from a drafted prospect, maybe ever. It's hard to say. You know, he wasn't Mario coming out. He wasn't even Lindros coming out. But his hockey IQ was off the charts. He didn't have the speed of McDavid or the skill of McDavid. He didn't have the scoring prowess of Austin Matthews. But the way he played was so smart at all times that he made everyone on the ice better every single time. This season, he's asked to do literally everything. Igor Sharangovich and Yanni Kuokkanen have been, Sharangovich is better now, thank goodness. The past month or two, he's been much better. But the first 3 months of the season, he was just straight up bad. And Yanni Kuokkanen has never found his game. So he's been trying to do something where he has no chemistry with line mates. He can't find the right line mates. I think we're in a better spot now when he has Bratt and Sharangovich. But he definitely has issues with that. And on top of it, you talked about you want to keep Lindy Ruff. Well, Lindy Ruff wants him to play like this. He wants him to take all of the risks. He's always been a high-risk, high-reward coach. It's one thing to ask Jamie Benn to do that, or Daniel Briere, who are players whose offensive ceiling can only be hit with that type of play style. And they're both very good players without the Lindy Ruff play style. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying that to exceed their offensive momentum, you play that kind of play style. Jack Hughes doesn't need to play that style. Jack Hughes can play multiple different kinds of hockey and still excel at a level where he's a top 10 to 15 center. I don't think he's in the right system. I don't. I think he's going to play well in this system. I think Lindy Ruff deserves a lot of credit for developing Jack Hughes. I do. I think Lindy Ruff has helped Jack Hughes get to where he is, but that doesn't mean he fits his system. That just means that I think Lindy Ruff is a good developmental coach with a bad system. So I think that Jack Hughes is in a situation now where he's doing what he's been told, and he's trying to use his instincts to make the plays he's being asked to make, but instincts only get you so far. And I think I talked to you about this before the podcast, where it's the same thing with Patrick Mahomes and the no-look pass. It's beautiful. It goes on SportsCenter. It looks great. But it doesn't account for the intervals. It doesn't account for it doesn't account for what could go wrong on that play. You are throwing it without looking at what you're throwing it at, which means that the play has to go exactly like it went in your head and exactly like it went in the huddle without a variable. In hockey, that's easier to do in football. I still don't like it. I don't like the no-look pass. I think it's a dumb play. In hockey, there are probably 4 times as many variables that could happen at any time because the game happens so fast, it's on ice, and it involves 5 offensive players who all can carry the puck. There's not one person carrying the puck. And there's 5 defensive players that are trying to get in the way of that. And tipping and stealing and things happen a lot more often. So I'm with you on one aspect where the no-look pass, the ill-advised no-look pass, especially a defensive zone no-look pass. They made a no-look pass. It wasn't Hughes. I forget. I think it might have been McLeod, but don't quote me on that. But somebody made a no-look pass to the middle of the ice in the defensive zone. It worked. You still shouldn't do it. Just because causation does not equal correlation. Just because it worked does not mean it was a good idea. So I'm with you there. Don't make ill-advised passes, especially when you're not looking where it's going. But to say that it's a Jack Hughes problem and not a Lindy Ruff problem, or whoever is, maybe it's a Mark Recchi problem, maybe he's running that offense, whoever. I think it's a Lindy Ruff problem because I saw similar things in Dallas. I'll be honest, I don't remember Buffalo enough to say that I saw it there, but I would assume everybody says he's had the same system. So I would assume a similar type of thing happened there. So I think that Jack Hughes is following what he's being told, and that is leading to these bad turnovers. I think that he needs to change the style that they play him in. But I just don't think that's going to happen.
Fair point. But there are times, and I'll say it again, the Devils have a 3-1 lead. Why would you do a no-look pass in the neutral zone to 3 Lightning players waiting to take that puck? It doesn't make sense to me. You've got to be smarter and protect the puck. It's not a Jack Hughes problem. I don't think I'll reread the article, but I maybe I did a bad job saying, maybe the title was a little edgy.
I think
Whatever.
The title is what got you in trouble because I read the article.
Probably.
It wasn't
Probably.
as it wasn't as. I think people would
Probably.
agree with you on a lot of the points in the article, but
well, most people didn't read the article, right? So, and you know what? That's fine.
Just give me the click, baby. Give me the click.
I don't even do it for the click. The funny thing about this, I'm not even trying to troll. You know me, I like to play pranks, and I wasn't even trying. I just want Jack Hughes to become an elite player for the New Jersey Devils. And I would love to have a Jack Hughes that leads the league in takeaways and leads the league with the least amount of giveaways, considering he's a high-risk player because of the amount of times he has to control the puck. And he's a marked man being the number one center and going against the number one defenses. And if you combine the two together, you've got a perennial all-star, a marketable player, charismatic, and he would be in the elite top 5 in the league. Forget about positions, like top 5, if he can do that. The hard part is the takeaways. I mean, you see him poke that puck out and then have the wherewithal to transition back onto the offense. What I'm saying is,
just on that point, just to add to that point, he very rarely has a takeaway where he very rarely attempts a takeaway that puts him in a bad position. That's one thing that's most impressive about Hughes, is that he knows when he can go for the takeaway and not put himself out of position.
But I will say this about Lindy Ruff again. I think you made some fair points. I think that it really doesn't matter what system it is, as long as the players believe in it and as long as the players have bought in. I don't think Lindy Ruff has ever lost control of this team. I really don't.
No, I don't either.
I don't think he has at all. I think he commands a lot of respect, but we do expect results. And the first dominoes have fallen. And I'll repeat this again: the power play and the penalty kill has improved greatly, but there's still more work needs to be done. But a lot of the times when the Devils are perfect on the penalty kill, they're only taking 1 penalty, maybe 2 at most. And that should be looked at, that the Devils, but they do need to do a lot better 5-on-5. And again, but that will come with time. And I just want to see at least Lindy Ruff see it through for one more season after this one. But if he ends up to pull a Joe Judge at the last game of the season, that's another story, But if you say what you want, but this team, a young team, has always, I think, has done very well in terms of, they may sleepwalk some of these periods, but they never give up. They didn't. They didn't mail it in. They're still playing out there, and also just keep in mind, Dougie Hamilton will be back soon, so maybe that will change the dynamics. And but yeah.
But yeah, no, I think we did it. I think we did it think we gave you your just due. I think we gave the point the just due. Like I said, I agree with most of what you said. I don't think it's a Jack Hughes problem, though. But that's the only difference we have. I think we're on the same page here. But I will say, I got an exciting article coming out tomorrow, Sam.
Oh, please tell.
And I think you'll like this too. So the Devils have come out with 5 new jerseys this year. Including the jersey, and then 4 warm-up jerseys to celebrate Pride Night, Hispanic Heritage Night, Chinese New Year, and I rank them. Now I don't rank the nights. This is not saying whether Hispanic Heritage is as important as Pride Nights or anywhere in between of those. So don't take it like that. I am taking the jersey on its surface and the design and the color scheme and the number layout and the font and everything. And I kind of look at that and I talk about the 5 jerseys that the Devils have released this year. I will say it was funny. My wife was sitting with me and was it the Lightning game where we wore the jersey? It was, right? We wore the jerseys for the Lightning game.
I believe so, yeah.
And she's like, oh, those look really nice. I was like, interesting. But what that tells me is that from above, when you're looking at them on the ice, they look great. These jerseys look great on the ice. When you look at them up close, that logo just doesn't do it for me.
Yep.
So that's where I'm at with that. But that'll be on pucksandpitchforks.com tomorrow. I'll also have a piece on Jesper Boquist coming out tomorrow. I saw Dan Rice. He was writing a piece on Artem Schlam of UConn. He spoke to him kind of about how his sophomore season's going, what it's like to be in the NCAA. And I'm going to write another piece tonight because we got to get more content out there for the people during this break.
Yeah, absolutely. More content. Again, this podcast, 8-day layoff. What about 9.5 months during a pandemic? We figured it out. This is nothing.
This is
nothing. This is, yeah.
We'll get
this
you
is like an empty net goal. And also, this podcast, probably tomorrow we'll make the announcement, surpassing 250,000 downloads, 250,000 downloads. We show no quit. The show must go on. But before we go, Nick, I just want to read a few comments. Tony P, trust the process. Devils will make the playoffs in 2025. What else here? Hire my boy Scotty Gomez to teach Jack the art of the no-look pass as AI skates. Colin 226, YouTube Live. I agree. This young team doesn't need a tough coach yet. And Donnell Weaver, Lindy Ruff has to go. It's got to go. But the blame goes on the ownership of Harris and Blitzer and also GM Fitzgerald as well.
I don't have time enough in this podcast to get into that, but maybe another time.
And Facebook Live, Ramona, she agrees with me. She says, Sam, you're right. And Doug Sanik says last 2 games were with the black jerseys. Yeah, you know what? I'll tell you what. Except the only thing I have a problem with that black jersey is the logo. And the other logos, the other jerseys that came out, Hispanic, Heritage Night, Pride Night, all that. I think all those jerseys are pretty sweet. Different variations. They did a great job doing that, and that's something to be proud of. And also the Chinese New Year's jersey, all that. It was definitely well thought out. I just think that the black jersey, they were just overthinking it. If they just put the Devils logo on to match the color scheme, I would buy 5 of them.
Yeah, me too.
With the shoes,
I would definitely have one. There'd be one right here, advertised every podcast. But instead, old school, baby.
I mean, it'll be expensive, but I may buy one and have a tailor or a seamstress or whatever to tackle twill a logo, and then I'll wear it, but then everyone's going to be like, where'd you get that, Sam?
That's not a bad idea. It actually probably wouldn't cost as much as you think. Like, the jersey will cost, but to get the crest off of this one, to put on that one, probably only costs like $30.
You know what? But I need to have it like tackle twill. I need to have it exact. So I'm thinking it's going to cost total of $600. The jersey itself, the material.
I don't know.
The time.
It costs that much.
How much is
If
the jersey? Isn't it like $249?
If I'm ever in Jersey, maybe I'll do that because these aren't going anywhere. As what I've heard, these are here for 3 years.
Okay. Yeah.
So.
And then I'll walk with that at the arena. Everyone's going to be like, where'd you get that? Where'd you get that? And I'll just make up something like, go to pucksandpitchforks.com.
Yeah. We'll sell them for $1,000. We'll make a little profit off this.
But everybody go to pucksandpitchforks.com when that article comes out because that's going to be great.
Tomorrow morning.
I'm going to be reading it. I'm going to be writing. I told you my little secret. I should probably write about why we should keep Lindy Ruff next year.
That's definitely something you should write about.
Yeah, and then it's going to be another troll fest, but that's okay with me because I believe in what I say.
We do have one going viral right now. I wrote about 5 players I think the Devils might give up their first-round pick this year on. Big names in that article. And then also I got one that came out today. 5 teams that could trade for Pavel Zacha. So if you go to pucksandpitchforks.com right now, plenty of content out there. Even talked about the rumor. You heard Larry Brooks' rumor that the Devils pushed for Jack Hughes to make the All-Star game over Jesper Bratt. Wrote about that.
I heard about that. Was that Larry, our good friend Larry Brooks?
That was friend of the podcast, Larry Brooks.
Wow.
Lots of stuff on pucksandpitchforks.com. But that's all I got, Sam.
Well, pucksandpitchforks.com. Go there. So keep it here, folks, with the Let's Go Devils podcast. Stay the fan address, pucksandpitchforks.com, where we talk Devils all the time. I want to thank all those listening, watching right now, dropping the podcast at midnight. Also want to thank Scott Wheeler of The Athletic for coming on. Also want to thank Ryan Kennedy of the Hockey News coming on, especially when Team USA and Team Canada, women's ice hockey in the Olympics, going for gold in a couple hours from now. Everyone's getting pumped up. I'm getting pumped up. It's hockey. We've got 7 more days to fill before the next Devils game. Keep it here. Keep it real. And go to pucksandpitchforks.com and read it all about it. Well, Nick, thank you. I'll see you later. Till next time, let's go Devils.